Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good to be with you on this now Wednesday morning here on the East Coast. We're broadcasting as we always do from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Just under an hour to go before the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket, getting ready to lift off from Pad 40 here at the Cape. A brand new Falcon booster on tap to fly in support of a mission for Amazon's Project Kuiper internet constellation. Similar to SpaceX's Starlink, this will also be a low Earth orbit broadband constellation of satellites designed to bring connectivity to folks not just here in North America, but around the world, especially in hard-to-reach areas. Tonight's launch represents the third flight of operational operational Kuiper satellites, following the launch of two batches of 27 apiece on United Launch Alliance Atlas V rockets in April and June. There are 24 Kuiper satellites on this particular Falcon 9 rocket, getting ready to lift off at 2:30 a.m. Eastern. Current T0, 2:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. 0630 UTC. Bit of a light breeze here on the Space Coast tonight. The 45th Weather Squadron forecast an 80% chance for favorable weather at liftoff. Appreciate all of you who are either getting up early or staying up late to be with us for our live coverage of this mission. See, we've got about a little more than 350 of you right now. If you haven't already, be sure to click that like button and share the stream. Allow some more folks who are awake at this hour to join us in our live launch coverage. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, as well as John Pisani, are running the technical operations of the broadcast this evening. Our photographer, Adam Bernstein, is out and about getting the cameras set, getting ready to track and image the Falcon 9 rocket once it does leave the pad there at Slick 40. Michael Caine has this morning's launch off, but if you're not already following the fellas, you can find them at their handles here on X. Adam is at Aburn NYC. Michael Caine, MD Caine Jr. John is at John Pisani Photo. And be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. If you're not on X, you can also find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook. We'll also be joined with tracking assistance this evening by our friends P. Carstens with Max Q Productions, as well as with Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Taking a look at their camera view right now. With 56 minutes remaining on the clock, and all of the fueling milestones still ahead of us, let's go ahead and take a beat to talk about the countdown timeline for SpaceX. The milestones ahead of us with a good fueling of the rocket there at Slick 40. Of course, it starts at about the T-minus 38-minute mark when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. SpaceX does its readiness poll electronically, so if it feels like it's in a good position to do so, it can take this poll a little early. But once the go-ahead is given for the start of tanking the rocket, fueling begins at the T-minus 35-minute mark with the loading of RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene aboard the Falcon 9's first and second stages. And at the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the rocket's first stage. T minus 30 minutes is when SpaceX starts loading a cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same is true on the second stage a few minutes afterwards. That helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP1 loading wraps up. And at T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down sequence begins. SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines at this point ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. We see this officially manifest as the so-called big vent that here at pad 40 begins at T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. And that's a good visual indication that fueling is moving along as expected. The vent will last until about 16 and a half minutes before liftoff, 30 seconds prior to second stage lock load beginning. Moving right along, T minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That's when SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps and help protect the 9 engines at the base of the Falcon booster from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank is full. And at T minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. The clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise known as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second, about a minute afterwards, at which point the rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before takeoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds, and the fall 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected. The command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, targeting 2:30 a.m. Eastern, 0630 UTC, T minus 52 minutes and 30 seconds. T minus 52 minutes and counting. I want to thank our moderators for once again joining us in assistance with this live launch coverage. I see Jeff Hansen and Astro Joe are back with us again. Appreciate the two of you popping back in. Also, Aussie Space Girl joining in the fun, a much more reasonable hour down in Australia. Hope you're doing well, Stephanie. Rick Donner also here with us one more time, having joined us for the Starlink 15-2 mission coverage as well. If you're not already in the know, you can help the moderators make their job that much easier just by following the rules of the live chat. We ask that you refrain from delving into overt politics and religion. We kindly ask that you not type your message in all caps, that you converse in English so that our moderators can respond as appropriate. And most importantly, treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. Our thanks also goes to channel member Cumulus Granatus for being here with us in the chat to help answer folks' questions as they come up. As is the case with all of our live launch coverage, this and every mission is made possible by our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like Sulfur for Lunch, Todd, Angela Cagle, DB, Let's see who else we have tonight. Jesse Mason is here with us. Charlene, and I know a number of others. So appreciate you all for your ongoing support of what we do here at Spaceflight Now. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. We do have some new mission patches that will be heading to our online shop in the very near future, if they're not already in there as I speak. Membership also affords you access to our members-only Discord server and the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. I want to welcome new channel member Kevin Roberts joining us with membership at the Pad Leader level. Same with DB. Welcome aboard to the both of you. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or you'd just like to offer some kind words of support, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature to have your comment or query elevated for discussion. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. To that end, I want to thank channel member and moderator Jeff Hansen for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff says, go Cape, go SpaceX, go Falcon 9, go Kuiper, Godspeed, Baby Bird, 1096. 1096 is what we believe to be the tail number for this particular first stage booster, although, as Jeff's message suggests, this is the first flight for this particular first stage booster, so until it comes back into port, we won't know with 100% certainty that it is, in fact, be 1096, but that is the going belief right now. Other possible candidate could be B1091, which also has not flown yet. Time now T minus 46 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. On board this Falcon 9 rocket are 24 of Amazon's Project Kuiper satellites. So far, the company has kept its satellites fairly shrouded in mystery, not revealing a whole lot of detail about them, but following the first launch back in late April on board ULA Atlas V rocket in the 551 configuration, so 5 solids on board that particular rocket. Amazon did share in the days that followed the mission a video of the deployment of those satellites. The video is not super high res since the satellites were deployed in the shadow of the Earth, so relying on the onboard lights from the Centaur upper stage. But this was our first really clear, or as clear as we've gotten, glimpse of what these Kuiper satellites look like in relative size compared to one another. In publishing its launch page, SpaceX did include the deployment time for these Kuiper satellites that are on board the Falcon 9 rocket, which is notable since the first two launches on board an Atlas V rocket in April and June, respectively, those did not include the time of deployment. So perhaps this indicates that Amazon is becoming a little bit more forthcoming with at least visual information on its Kuiper satellites, and we may actually see a live deployment tonight. We'll just have to wait and see once we actually get into the mission. But as you can see, the satellites are not all released at once like you would see for a Starlink launch when they all just are deployed in one fell swoop from the Falcon 9 upper stage. These are released in batches. The deployment sequence for today's flight is set to begin at T plus 56 minutes and 18 seconds after liftoff, and will wrap up at about T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 58 seconds. Hopefully, when these satellites are ready to deploy from the Falcon 9 rocket, Amazon is willing and has given SpaceX permission to show the actual deployment, and B, hopefully they have good lighting so we can get a better glimpse of what these satellites actually look like. Time now T minus 40 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. I want to thank channel member moderator Aussie Space Girl for being a member with us now for 28 months at the pad leader level, who says go SpaceX and Falcon 9. Also, thanks to Bella Bratt with the $10 super chat. Not entirely sure to what you're referring. I think you may have misheard me at one point, but I'm not sure what you mean by a teaser launch. Um, Our apologies if there was something that was unclear, but unfortunately, I'm not sure what you're referring to, so I can't really respond with any greater clarity on that. But thank you so much for your support tonight. SpaceX is just about 2 minutes away, generally speaking, from making the call on the start of prop load for tonight's mission. Heading into things, there was a 27-minute long window that opened up at 2:18 a.m. Eastern. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch in today's opportunity, they do have another backup 27-minute window that opens up on Thursday, July 17th at 1:57 a.m. Eastern. Time now T minus 37 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX should have made a call on the start of prop load if it feels like it's in a good position to move ahead with the start of fueling. Taking a look at an image shared by Amazon in the days leading up to the launch that we have on tap, hopefully in 37 minutes. Taking a look at the Falcon 9 payload fairings that are currently encapsulating the 24 Kuiper satellites. That building is Amazon's satellite processing facility that was built out at the Space Florida Launch and Landing Facility, formerly the Shuttle Landing Facility here at the Kennedy Space Center. This building able to process the Kuiper satellites and encapsulate them in payload fairings of any of the rockets that it purchased in order to deploy its constellation into low Earth orbit. Those, of course, include the fairings for the rocket that you see there on the right-hand side of your screen, the Falcon 9, as well as ULA's Atlas V and Vulcan rockets, along with Blue Origin's New Glenn. Since Amazon has not made any mention of processing its satellites for the missions in which we'll use Arianespace's Ariane 6 rocket, likely those satellites won't come through this building, but rather just head straight to French Guiana for final processing down there. Although the first launch of an Ariane 6 rocket with Kuiper satellites has not been announced yet. The next Ariane 6 rocket actually set to lift off next month with a payload for EUMETSAT. Also, the next New Glenn rocket, its payload has not been announced, but don't believe that it would be batch of Kuiper satellites. There's been some speculation that it could be the Escapade satellites from NASA that are bound for Mars that once upon a time were scheduled to launch back in October of last year, but Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket was not ready in time, and so that mission got punted. Coming back to tonight's mission, though, getting off on a little tangent here. Currently T minus 34 minutes and 34 seconds. At this point, assuming the go ahead was given for start of fueling on this Falcon 9 rocket, tanking is now underway. We'll be watching for signs of fueling the Falcon 9 rocket, which is going to be a little trickier given that this is a new booster that doesn't have any sootiness to it. But we're watching for the same telltale signs of tanking of the rocket. That being as the liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the first stage, we'll start to see a frost line form, hopefully, and a little bit of vapor around the outside of the rocket as well. Although, given that this is a customer mission, there's a non-zero chance that SpaceX themselves will announce that they've given the go-ahead for the start of fueling. While it is hard to see the frost line that is forming on the rocket itself, we are now much more clearly starting to see some vapor. If you look near the X in the lettering of SpaceX, you can see it start to build around the skin of the rocket as that super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the first stage of the vehicle. This is a good sign since indicates the start of fueling and more importantly means that SpaceX is now locked into the current T0 time of 2:30 a.m. Eastern, 0630 UTC, because SpaceX uses that densified liquid oxygen. They enact a load and go style of fueling, which means that once the tanking process has begun, they fuel pretty close to right up alongside the point of liftoff, and they don't have the option to hold the countdown. Time now, T minus 26 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. For those of you who may just be joining us at this point in the count, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the KF-01 mission, a batch of Amazon's Project Kuiper satellites that are getting ready to fly on board a Falcon 9 rocket. This is the first of three Falcon 9 rockets that Amazon procured in order to get its satellite constellation into low Earth orbit. It's one of more than 80 rockets in total that the tech giant has bought in order to get its satellite service up and running. Those include a total of 9 Atlas V rockets, 38 Vulcan rockets, both from ULA, of course. Blue Origin, it bought 12 New Glenn flights with the option of adding an additional 15, and then 18 launches on board Ariane 6 rocket. And these Falcon 9 flights were not among the first or even the second wave of flight vehicles that Amazon purchased. The 9 Atlas V rockets were announced back in 2021. That was followed in April of 2022 with the rockets from ULA, Ariane Space, and Blue Origin. But it wasn't until there was significant pushback from Amazon investors that in December of 2023, the company eventually announced that it signed a launch contract with SpaceX to fly dedicated missions of its Kuiper satellites using Falcon 9 rockets, the first of which, of course, sitting right now on the pad, less than 25 minutes away from takeoff. TBD on when the next Falcon 9 rocket will lift off with Kuiper satellites on board. Amazon has not said a whole lot about their production rate or how often they're sending satellites down here to the Cape. But the next time ULA will fly uh, Kuiper satellites will actually not be with an Atlas V rocket like the first two Kuiper missions happen to be. Now, the next time they fly will be on a Vulcan rocket, but that is going to have to wait until after the launch of two national service payloads, or national security payloads, I should say. Those missions launching on behalf of the U.S. Space Force are USSF 106, which is currently being readied out at Space Launch Complex 41. That'll be followed by USSF 87. And then once those missions are both taken care of, at that point, the next launch for ULA will be a Kuiper flight on Vulcan. Taking a look at our live chat here as we approach the start of the so-called big vent. A question from Raider 6000 asking about the launch window today. Well, the original launch window lasted 27 minutes, opening up at 2:18 a.m. Eastern. However, because SpaceX is currently now fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, while technically the launch window does still have some opportunities left within it. Once the Falcon 9 starts tanking, that does commit them to this current launch attempt, which has a T0 at 2:30 a.m. Eastern, 0630 UTC for those joining around the world. 21 minutes and counting. In less than 10 seconds, SpaceX will start the chill down of the feed lines there at the pad as they get ready to start loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's second stage. We'll see this manifest as the so-called big vent, which will begin in just about 20 seconds from now. And there you see the start of the big vent on time. This process will last for about 4 minutes in total, setting up for second stage LOX load to begin. Now less than 17 minutes remaining in the count and less than 30 seconds left on the so-called big vent before this wraps up. We turn to second stage liquid oxygen load. Second stage liquid oxygen load is about to begin here on the Falcon 9 rocket. Taking a look at the mission patch that SpaceX designed for this first flight of Kuiper satellites on board a Falcon 9 rocket. Of course, featuring the always present four-leaf clover at the heart of the design. The next fueling milestone that we're looking forward to is the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines by flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. That's coming up at T-minus 7 minutes. With 15 minutes remaining on the clock at this point, I want to go ahead and show you a clip of Amazon's Project Kuiper production, a little bit of a glimpse into how this comes together and how the full system works.
Project Kuiper as a three-part system: the satellite constellation, the customer terminal, and just as critically, the ground network and software that ultimately deliver connectivity. We have set out to design the most advanced satellite network ever built, and we have created the whole thing in-house at Amazon. You need just about every technology area to contribute to build the satellite: the propulsion system, the solar arrays, the silicon, the phased array antennas, the optical intersatellite links.
The team has to be innovative, agile, resilient as we're moving very, very fast. Building, testing, developing in-house has been an extraordinary ingredient.
When we first proposed Project Kuiper internally, one of the first questions was, can you produce an affordable customer terminal? We knew that was going to be the linchpin of our system.
The big breakthrough for us was combining transmit and receive antennas into a single aperture. No one had ever done this in the Ka-band. That let us pack a ton of performance into a really compact, really low-cost design. We're going to build tens of millions of these antennas, and we are well on our way. The design is done. We're now in the factory manufacturing it.
We talk about the satellites and constellation, but Kuiper is a satellite constellation being operated as a network across hundreds of ground gateway terminals.
Our ground network is spread out all over the world, and each site connects back to AWS. We already have a bunch of these sites installed everywhere from Australia to Germany, and more of them are coming online every month.
Amazon has quite a bit of work to do when it comes to making sure it gets its constellation on orbit. As part of a requirement from the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, the company needs to have at least half of its planned 3,200 satellites on orbit by July 30th of 2026. It's spreading these satellites across three different altitudes: 360 kilometers, 610 kilometers, and 590 kilometers. So far, with the first two missions, it has deployed them up to 630 kilometers in altitude. And that will be the case ultimately with the ones that are set to launch tonight. Now, they are not deploying directly to that altitude. Amazon says that once separated from the Falcon 9's second stage, they'll actually be deployed at an altitude of 289 miles or 465 kilometers above Earth, and then the satellites will be raised to their assigned altitude of 630 kilometers. And back in some of the older paperwork concerning the Project Kuiper constellation, one of the notes that the SEC remarked said that if Amazon was not able to have half of its constellation on orbit and operating by the end of July of next year, quote, may result in Kuiper's authorization being reduced to the number of satellites in use on the milestone date. So Amazon has quite a bit of work to do over the course of the next year in order to make sure that it achieves that marker of getting more than 1,600 satellites in operation on orbit. We're now getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket as SpaceX is preparing to launch in now less than 10 minutes. Just a quick note about what you're seeing on screen. The countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner is a little bit different than what you're seeing in the big box. Reason being, our countdown clock reflects real time, and what's coming in from SpaceX is coming in on a slight delay. So as long as we have tracking views of the Falcon 9 rocket, we'll be making our callouts based off of real-time events. SpaceX commentator notes that weather is good and the range is ready to support. She says they are keeping an eye on the weather, but so far things are progressing well. However, even though we do have the full countdown timeline, or excuse me, the full launch timeline, including when the Kuiper satellites are set to deploy at Amazon's request, as we've seen now twice with ULA Atlas launches, they are still requesting that no views, sounds like, be shown of their Kuiper satellites. And so coverage will wrap up from SpaceX shortly after the first stage booster lands on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Using SpaceX's graphics to talk about the Falcon 9 rocket. Falcon 9 standing 70 meters or 229 feet tall with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Again, this first stage booster flying for its first time. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines. Actually taking a live look now at a short fall of gravitas, the drone ship that will be used to catch the first stage booster. Time now T-minus 6 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Mentioned the first stage, powered by 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Above the first stage is the inner stage, which is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. Heard confirmation that stage 1 RP1 loading has wrapped up. Inner stage features the deployable hypersonic grid fins, which are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the rocket as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the vehicle's second stage, and at main stage, first stage, managed cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. Above the inner stage is the second stage, which includes a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, which produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust. They'll be fired twice on today's flight to place the 24 Kuiper satellites on their way to their final destination at 630 kilometers in altitude. At the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, which currently encapsulate the Kuiper satellites. Fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and are 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height, and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. SpaceX notes that these fairing halves are very much flight proven today, one half flying for its 28th time, the other for its 27th. As the strong back retract sequence is getting underway and the transporter erector is getting ready to recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Let's go ahead and take a brief moment to talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket is going to be flying once it leaves the pad. Talking trajectory. Falcon 9 rocket is going to be heading off from Space Launch Complex 40, or Slick 40, here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Rocket will be flying in a northeasterly trajectory, heading away from Florida's Space Coast. Following stage separation, the first stage booster, again believed to be tail number 1096, will target a landing on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. If successful, this will be the 118th booster landing for this particular drone ship and the 476th booster landing to date. SpaceX will also recover those 2 fairing halves that we just mentioned once they splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. They'll be brought aboard one of the recovery vessels, brought back through Port Canaveral, and then onto the Hangar X site, where they will be refurbished and turn around for their next flight. Stage 1 liquid oxygen load has wrapped up. We're awaiting second stage lock load to be complete, which should finish in the next 20 seconds or so. Less than 2 minutes now. Second stage lock load should be complete. Rocket loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. The venting you're seeing now are the ground gas closeouts as SpaceX releases the remaining liquid oxygen in the feed lines.
You've probably noticed those white clouds that are venting from the rocket. That's not smoke, it's actually condensation. As the liquid oxygen warms slightly inside the tanks, some of it boils off. That gas is then vented to manage the pressure. When the vented oxygen hits the warm, humid Florida air, it instantly condenses into those clouds. It's the same principle.
T-minus 1 minute and counting. SpaceX confirms no issues are being worked.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And with that call, we're just now awaiting the SpaceX launch director to make the call on the start of, or to make their go for launch call.
Launch director is go for launch.
With that final go for launch, we are now just about 20 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff with the Falcon 9 rocket carrying its first batch of Amazon's Project Kuiper satellites. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. We're now a little more than a minute into flight. Coming up, as you'll see momentarily, Falcon 9 will throttle back as it passes through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now passing max Q. Rocket throttling up, passing the speed of sound, now about a minute and a half into flight. SpaceX will now chill the Merlin vacuum engine ahead of its ignition. Coming up, there are a trio of events fairly quickly. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, coming up at about T plus 2 minutes and 27 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The payload fairings will be jettisoned about 3.5 minutes into flight, less than 10 seconds from MECO. MECO. Stage separation. And second stage engine start.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 startup.
Again, because Amazon is requesting that no views of its Kuiper satellites be shown live during this broadcast. That's why we're not seeing upper stage views beyond that brief point of stage separation in the broadcast here. SpaceX noting that it's using the fairing recovery vessel known as Doug, named after former NASA astronaut Doug Hurley. You saw those fairing halves jettison. Again, we're not going to see that in SpaceX's broadcast. No onboard camera views of that are being made public. A little more than 4 minutes into flight now. Coming up, the next milestone is the first stage entry burn, which will use 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines on the booster to begin to dramatically slow the vehicle down. That's set to begin now in just a little less than 2 minutes. Taking a look at the telemetry data and a map of where the first and second stages currently are and their journeys. SpaceX employing this likely because they're not great views coming from the booster stage at the moment, and of course, Amazon has requested that no upper stage views be shared on this particular mission. Coming up on the start of the entry burn here in less than 10 seconds. Entry burn should be underway now. And both Adam and Pete have got it. Well done. Entry burn should be wrapping up here in the next couple of seconds in real time. You see that wrapped up now. Of course, SpaceX feed coming in on a slight delay, which is why you're still seeing it there on those onboard camera views.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
With the conclusion of that entry burn, we're now looking towards the landing burn set to begin starting at about T plus 8 minutes and 6 seconds. The time you're wanting to look for is in the bottom middle of the screen now at this point. Less than 30 seconds away from the start of the landing burn. Again, this will use just one of the Merlin engines, the center engine on the booster.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And a good confirmation and good visuals on this booster landing for the very first time, and a confirmation for a nominal orbit insertion on the second stage as well. View inside of Mission Control headquarters, or Mission Control at SpaceX facilities in Hawthorne, California. Again, because of Amazon's request, they are not showing deployment of the 24 Kuiper satellites that are on board this mission. The timeline at this point, though, is somewhat similar to a batch of Starlink satellites that are getting ready to deploy. There will be one more burn of the upper stage engine to help circularize the orbit. It's coming up at about T plus 52 minutes and 43 seconds. That burn lasting about 3 seconds in duration, setting up for the start of the deployment sequence to begin at T plus 56 minutes and 18 seconds, lasting until T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 58 seconds post liftoff. As we go ahead and get our launch replays ready for you, let's take a moment and talk about the mission stats as they currently stand. With a good liftoff and landing, this was, we believe, the first flight of Falcon 9 booster 1096. Again, we'll have that confirmed once it arrives back into port in a couple days. This was the 504th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 87th of the year so far. This was, well, not a reflight, so the reflight number stays the same as from our last launch of the Starlink 15-2 mission, holding steady at 441. This was SpaceX's 151st orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 266th orbital flight from Pad 40, and the 321st overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's where the bar chart for the Falcon family of rockets currently stands. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 118th good landing on the drone ship called a Shortfall of Gravitas. It marked the 386th SpaceX drone ship landing and the 476th overall booster landing for SpaceX to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 61st orbital launch from Florida, the 92nd from U.S. soil, the 102nd from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 153rd overall orbital launch around the world. There have been 3 orbital mishaps so far on the year. Here's where our pie chart now currently stands. just doing a little final buttoning up on the replays. Want to thank channel member Brian Beelman for a $2 super chat. Really appreciate the support tonight, Brian. And let's go ahead and start those replays, beginning with the fixed view as set by our Adam Bernstein here at the press site. Moving on to the wide view. Moving along to the turn basin shot now. Moving on to Pete Carson's tracker. Moving on to Pete's wide tracker view now. Moving on to the tracking view now from Chuck and Jen Briggs up in Titusville. And finally, we wrap up with Adam's tracker view here at the press site. And that'll just about do it for us with this second of two Falcon 9 flight live launch coverages here on the channel. A couple more folks to thank before we go ahead and wrap this all up. Our thanks to Macaw SJ for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Macaw. Well, Racing Superhawk also with a $5 super chat. Another one of our channel members here on YouTube who says, thanks Spacefly Now team and mods. Good night all. And Bella Brat for you with a $10 super chat who says, tracking was on point tonight. Love all the views. Thank you all for bringing this all to us and doing so much work for everyone to experience and view. Cheers, Spaceflight Now, Will, Mods, and Cumulus Granatus. And our thanks to Cumulus as well as the moderators in the chat have been helping us out tonight. Jeff Hansen, Aussie Space Girl, Rick Donner, Astro Joe. Appreciate all of you for being with us this evening, or this morning, rather. It's almost 3 o'clock here on the East Coast. It's very much morning now. I also want to thank our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Thanks always to our photography team. If you're not following the fellas on X here, that handles One More Time. John also helping out with the technical aspects of the broadcast alongside our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young. Most of all, though, I want to thank you for wherever you've been watching from. We hope you hit that subscribe button on your way out the digital door, and we look forward to welcoming you in next time we have live coverage from here in Florida or out in California or elsewhere. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.